this episode of The World on Roids, we aim our sights on the space race, an era of genius, innovation, stupidity, and international conflict and competition.
No, their fledgling is on the spot.
A severe propaganda defeat for this country.
The U.S. and USSR were in a fearsome battle of ideologies that went back and forth in Nam, Korea, the GAN, the Congo Crisis, the Western Sahara War, the Omani Civil War, the Rhodesian Bush War, the Ugandan War, the insurgency in Jammu and Kashmir, and many more. But that's just to name a few.
However, they didn't use pawns to fight their battles. In 1957, the Soviets launched the world's first artificial satellite, Sputnik. This started what was known as the space race, where both countries competed to be the leading world power in space exploration. They thought that winning this space race would prove their economic system was better.
In 1962, Kennedy gave his "We Choose to Go to the Moon" speech, which was almost rebellious on his part, considering what happened to his sister. A year earlier, Congress had told him that putting a man on the moon was impossible, but he said we'd do it anyways.
We choose to go to the moon. We choose to go to the moon. We choose to go to the moon in this decade and do the other things. Not because they are easy, but because they are hard. Because that challenge is one that we're willing to accept, one we are unwilling to postpone, and one we intend to win.
This speech resulted in the creation of a new manned spaceflight program, whose mission was to take man to the moon. This program was aptly named after the Greek god of the sun, Apollo. The introduction of the Apollo program brought the two previous human spaceflight programs to an end. The programs were Project Mercury and Gemini. These projects focused on single-person spaceflight into orbit, but Apollo would focus on going to the moon.
The first of the Apollo missions was a total disaster, which was almost tradition for the U.S. spaceflight programs. After Apollo 1 failed, NASA decided to skip numbers 2 through 6, with the next official Apollo launch being Apollo 7. The missions 2 to 6 were done separately from the Apollo programs, most of them being suborbital flight.
The next 4 Apollo program launches were manned orbital flights, intended to test different systems for the eventual moon landing. Apollo 7's mission was to test crew performance. Apollo 8's was to demonstrate command service module navigation and mid-flight corrections. Apollo 9's was to practice docking maneuvers to test the first lunar module. And Apollo 10's mission was to combine everything from the previous missions in preparation for the moon landing, except for the landing on the moon. What's the deal with Apollos 2 to 6? Am I right?
Apollo 11 would be mankind's first attempt at landing on the moon. And by golly, they did! Woo! Man, I love the Apollo missions. It didn't just end with the famous Neil Armstrong line.
It's one small step for man, one giant leap for mankind.
We had other missions after that, like Apollo 12 all the way up to Apollo 17. A true display of power for the United States to make it up to the moon that many times.
Apollo 15 and 17 were the most notable post-Apollo 11 missions. Apollo 15 was the first J mission, which was a mission intended for longer stays on the moon and more focus on science and exploration. As for why they were called J missions, who's to say? The mission lasted 12 days from takeoff to touchdown. Apollo 15 was the first time the crew used the lunar rover, allowing them to travel further from the landing module.
That max acceleration? No. Man, you are really bouncing.
On this mission, the crew proved that in a frictionless environment, all objects with mass fall at the same acceleration. They demonstrated this with a feather and hammer.
And I'll drop the 2 of them here, and hopefully they'll hit the ground at the same time. How about that? How about
Apollo 17 was the last Apollo mission, and it was also the last time humans traveled out of low Earth orbit. It was also the last time the Saturn V rocket was used to carry humans. It was the longest Apollo mission, being 3 hours longer than Apollo 15. Surprisingly, the insignia for Apollo 17 was the first one that featured the Greek god Apollo. Yeah, man, we totally won the war, man. It was insane. We had these huge poles with fire on the bottom with little dudes in them. And I heard that we sent some guys that one time to the moon and they did some cool stuff, man. Give me some ranch.